Hello and welcome to The Birth of a New Dimension. My name is Aurora. I named this radio show Birth of a New Dimension because it is literally about the process that we as individuals and as a collective planet and society are undergoing. Brief pause. I apologize for any sounds of yard work that you might hear outside. So, many times on this this weekly show, what I reference is what I call the sophisticated antediluvian or pre-flood worldwide culture known as Atlantis. And today I'd like to talk a little bit more extensively about what that culture was like and how that affects our reality that we are experiencing right now. And this birth of a new dimension is really the transcendence of the limitations and difficulties that are arising in our current era as an end result of the deep ancient history, past antiquity of what happened, well, basically what would be considered in prehistory of humanity on this planet right now. So yeah, human history right now counts back to, about 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, and maybe 10,000 at the most, and the rest is considered before recorded human history. However, there was an entire, as I said, sophisticated society that existed here, essentially before what is known as the fall from grace, the fall of consciousness. What in the Bible is referred to as the fall from grace because it is programming about humans being sinners. Please don't ever think of yourself as sinners. That is not truthful. That's not what's going on. What actually happened, so I talk about this in my webinar series, Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans. There's my free plug for me. And I have a specific lesson that I just did that is called Galactic History, and also it's the history of technology, it's the origins of artificial intelligence, and it is also about self-protection from negative thought entities. Because when I speak about those pesky occupiers of the interstices, I'm referring to the invaders of consciousness and invaders of the human DNA genome that came to this planet between 10 and 20,000 years ago. And so here's the basic gist of what happened. And also, please understand that this information I used to keep not like as a proprietary secret, but only for the initiated, to fully enrolled students of the class, because I recognize that the concepts involved could be emotionally perturbing, that they could be upsetting, that they could make people fly off the handle if it wasn't presented in the right way. So, brief pause, lawnmower. I'm facing huge challenges in being able to record my show here today with the ongoing lawnmower activity outside. It's no fun learning that your planet has been invaded. It's no fun learning that your body has been manipulated and diminished, and that your consciousness has been harmed and intentionally limited in its perception and full functioning. Like that, none of that stuff is fun to learn about. And that, unfortunately, is the story of not only galactic history on a wider scale, but the story of what has happened on this particular planet. So the basic gist of it goes that before what is known mythologically or historically as the fall, and Atlantis, this sophisticated culture, is referred to in mythological terms as something that might have existed but is more of an imaginary realm. No, it was a very, very real place, and it wasn't just one continent that existed and then sank beneath the waves like that Donovan song. It was a level of culture, meaning human cultivation and civilization, and also activity that was connected to the rest of consciousness that is non-local, meaning in other times and places. So yes, for anyone who's listening to this show, I'm sure that you're already on the same page. The Earth is not the only place where consciousness has ever existed. To think so is like the most ridiculous assertion I could ever believe. Like, I dropped my opera glasses. How silly. Consciousness exists in many, many different places. Consciousness exists going at a variety of different speeds. So what we are experiencing here on this planet is like one step on the journey of consciousness, and it's supposed to be a living kind of current, like electricity, that flows from place to place. That's the whole idea. And for about the past 10,000 years since this fall of consciousness here on this planet, humans have been swirling around like in a whirlpool, but not able to effectively transcend and go where they actually want to on their trajectory. And all of this has to do with, let's say, an imbalance in our galaxy, and not only in our galaxy, I have to say also an imbalance in the time field itself. And the time field is not just one galaxy, it's not just one universe, it's all the multiplicity of timelines and possible realities that can ever exist. So the unfortunate news, the good news, bad news, everyone, is that this planet was invaded about 10 or 20,000 years ago. And the good news is that we are now at this point, what I call birth of a new dimension, where we are transcending those limitations. That basically the behavior of our DNA as a dynamic living being that also transports information and consciousness was limited about 10,000 years ago. And what we've experienced as all of what is known as recorded human history is the end result of that. The way that it was, the methodology or the tools that were used to limit free genetic expression here can be considered a form of very high sophisticated technology, but don't be unduly impressed. It's not really that great. But technology was used like as a weapon to diminish consciousness here. Because, hey, if you're going to invade a planet, you don't have to just invade a planet like here's a giant fleet of metal clank spaceships flying in the sky and come in with your lasers blasting and blast everybody away. You don't have to do it in that way. That's not what happened. What happened was much more insidious because it was invisible. It was not like being able to see with your physical eyes a bunch of, giant metal spaceships flying on in and then something happened. I should also set the stage of what happened before the invasion. What was life like before the invasion? So that time could be known as the time of the immortals because nobody died. Now this is big. I teach about this a lot in my class. The idea that death is an aberration. The experience of death is a thing that should not actually be a social aberration. That is like if you pick your nose in public, like you're not actually supposed to do that around here. And the truth is, you're not actually supposed to die. Our bodies were created as incredibly sophisticated instruments of perception and experience. And they were meant to last a really, really, really long time. And then, instead of dying, what was supposed to happen, or what is still intended to happen, which is inevitable, is that the solidified light that is coalesced into matter as the body gets more and more and more energy and moves at a faster and faster and faster rate until it achieves a state that we could only describe as light again. I'm just going to keep talking through the sound of that lawnmower and screw everything. So yes, we came from light, literally the stellar network, and our consciousness is pure light. And the matter that we're using as our body, everything from your bones to your skin, all of that came from light, either from this particular star that we're living under and around, Sol, from the solar system, or from a long ago star that already lived out its entire existence. And if you're not familiar with this concept, stars have a lifespan. Even though they're really, really, really long in terms of time scale, they have a lifespan. So it might seem like the sun and the stars are eternal. And there are many love songs about that too. However, stars have a limited lifespan. They coalesce as out of nebulae. They have a metabolism throughout their life of basically sending out energy and also receiving energy. And then at the end of that metabolic process, they can no longer support their consciousness in that container, and everything collapses in on itself, and that's what's known as a black hole. So, and sometimes the collapsing in on itself process of a star causes these amazing explosions, which are a different type of nebula, and that creates wonderful, heavier elements that end up being used for biological life, like our bodies. So the calcium in our bones and other forms of heavier elements were created in the death explosion, the, transcendent moment of metamorphosis of a big giant star a long, long time ago before this present star is here shining for us. So basically all of the matter of our bodies came from the stars. And I harp on this concept a lot. The idea that matter comes from the root word mother, meaning that we are consciousness right now embedded in this material world, the same way that a fetus is gestating in the womb of the mother, and that we are growing our consciousness. Ignore the lawnmower, everyone, ignore it. We are growing our consciousness while we are submerged in this material realm. And just like a baby, at a certain point, you get to be born. You don't stay in your mother's womb for forever. What you do at a certain point is you have grown all of the necessary items necessary to live independently, and you emerge from the womb. And it is that emergence from the realm of physical matter that we would define as ascension. So some people think ascension is like, Calgon, take me away. They think it's the ultimate escapism. Like, life is horrible, life is terrible, and you're just going to like fly away somewhere cooler than this place. And I understand that this place has been very uncool for a very long amount of time. So I understand all of those desires. However, the idea of ascension is less akin to flying away on a physical spaceship or something like that, and much closer to the metamorphosis or transformational process that some biological organisms go through, like a caterpillar into a butterfly. Now, someone who knew you as a caterpillar might not be able to recognize you in your butterfly form. They might not even be able to perceive you in your butterfly form, because they might not be able to look up, or maybe they're only able to focus on the little tiny square footage of leaf directly in front of them. And meanwhile, you are flying around from flower to flower, moving in a way that they can't even perceive. So that analogy is much more akin to what is going on when we experience this metamorphosis from being a materialized body into being a non-material body again. Because again, we come from light, which is the stars, and we return to light, but having gone through all this experience of being densified matter at a certain point. So the idea is, in ancient Atlantis, or the sophisticated antediluvian worldwide culture that is mythologically known as Atlantis, nobody died. Nobody hit what I call the membrane of death, which is a literal membrane that is a separation of certain areas of the time field from other certain areas of the time field. And it's kind of like the brick wall. There's all these train tracks or all these roads that lead up to the brick wall. And if you don't turn the steering wheel of your car, of your life, you hit the wall. It's a wall of death. And the wall is comprised of all of the last moments of all of the possible combinations of timelines of your existence. Because there are not an infinite, but let's say very, very, very many, an almost uncountable number of possibilities of your life, like different combinations of the Rubik's Cube, of the various different things you can do and say and think and eat and go, behaviors and places you can occupy. But it's not infinite. And at a certain point, you've explored all of those possible combinations of events. And what happens is, almost every single one of those possible combinations of events ends in death, just like a Choose Your Own Adventure novel or that movie Groundhog's Day, except for one very crucial, non-membrane of death experiencing timeline that actually exits through a little tiny wormhole and brings you back to the source that originally emanated you, and the source is a source of consciousness. So the whole idea is, we were designed originally by the great composer, the great creator of all of this music, to have a physical body and maintain our connection to the band leader the whole time. You're not supposed to be like sitting here in the symphony being like, I got this instrument, but I don't know what to play and I don't know when to play it. And your body is your instrument. You're supposed to be like, hey, I've got this instrument. I know that I'm here for a purpose. I know I'm supposed to be playing specific notes, and I can actually hear the conductor telling me, you play this now. No, now you rest. Now play this. Now rest. And that means doing certain things or saying certain things or thinking certain things or eating certain things in the right way that you add up to what I call the symphony of life. And the symphony of life involves every single organism and also, what we would call non-embodied consciousness, because there are certain levels of consciousness that are made of pure energy. That's all part of the symphony of being alive. Being alive means that you agree to play the right notes. If you do not play the right notes, you don't get to keep on being in the time field. And now we get on to that topic of galactic history and the things that make some people emotionally fly off the handle. And that's the recognition that there were some beings that intentionally chose a huge, long time ago to intentionally play the wrong notes. They're like, we are not going to listen to the great composer. We are going to choose to emanate ourselves from the source of consciousness, but not into a physical, embodied, biological body. and not on a bridge of love. So my whole audience here, we're all embodied humans. I'm not talking to any viruses or corporations or semi-alive beings. All of us had to work very, very hard in order to get our bodies. We had to, gestate a container for consciousness, a little fetus in a womb, and transfer our consciousness from the abstract, higher dimensional realm into that body. And that ain't easy. And that's why it takes a bunch of tries, just like it takes many, many tries to successfully transcend this level of life experience. It takes many, many tries just to even get into this life experience. And that's also how we can understand, miscarriages and stillbirths and pregnancies that do not have the end result of a live birth. There's a lot of research and development, a lot of trial and error that goes into just being here. So there were some beings that were like, we don't like this music. We don't respect this band. We don't like being in the symphony, but we want to go down there and make a bunch of noise. And that's the whole point. There's supposed to be a fail-safe mechanism so that you can't just come into where real musicians are playing and make a bunch of noise. So they decided they're going to game the system. People that look at any kind of established system and they're like, how can I get something out of it without putting something into it? And so these beings decided somewhere along those lines. So they invented technology. And this is the whole point. Technology that is, non-terrestrial technology, extraterrestrial technology that basically runs on consciousness. So the technology that we have here on Earth right now, what I define as the terrestrial technosphere, the collection of all items and doodads and tools that humans have created on Earth as technology to help us to live and survive in these diminished forms, that all of that technology on Earth, it basically runs on electrons flowing in a wire. And that's cool. They're electrons and they flow from, maybe from like a battery through the circuitry of a little, watch or something or a cell phone and then out to the other end of it's like a pathway that the currency takes. And that's electrons in terrestrial technology. In non-terrestrial technology, what is flowing, but not necessarily through metal wires, is consciousness, like yours and my consciousness. And our consciousness is supposed to flow through time in a particular way that makes music that is considered part of this beautiful fabric or tapestry that's very complex and embroidered. The pathways, or like think about in a body, the pathways that red blood cells take circulating around a body are very necessary. Like if you're a red blood cell and you're not circulating in the right pathways throughout the body, essentially what you're doing is either, bleeding profusely or having a blood clot or lack of blood to some vital area of your body. Both of those are a symptom of having a health crisis. Like everything is not okay, red flags, alarm bells, something is not okay. And our consciousnesses, in terms of human consciousness flowing, through the channels of time that are like the capillaries of time, have been subverted and disrupted for over 10,000 years. So there's a larger time body, just like we have red blood cells that flow through our body. There's a larger body that we live in that relies upon us the same way we rely upon red blood cells. And things have been clogged up and backed up, and on other levels, there's been bleed through. Blood going where it's not actually supposed to go. Consciousness going where it's not actually supposed to go. So this membrane of death is supposed to be a cold, frozen place of pure entropy. And what has happened is, due to this dark magic, we could call it satanic technology, extraterrestrial. And when I say satanic, I'm not a biblical literalist. I'm speaking about a particular space race that uses this dark technology in order to power all of its vehicles and life support systems. And it doesn't use like what we use, which is food, like you eat a bunch of plants or animals and digest it in your tummy with a bunch of microbes, and then that's what makes your body continue to move through time. They make their body or their consciousness continue to move through time, but more like with battery packs. And they get their energy for their battery packs from people like you and me. This is the part that makes people like you and me sometimes really upset. When you find that you got parasites. And I don't just mean worms in your tummy. I mean energetic worms. Beings that are literally siphoning off energy from you, me, and everyone here. Everyone who is a domesticated animal, in order to fill up their own energetic battery packs and go where they want to go. That's technically not where they're supposed to be. Because basically the premise is, Any place where you're supposed to be able to get there naturally, using nothing more than your birthday suit. And if you need a bunch of clank metal spaceships or whatever to get someplace else, you ain't supposed to go to that place. This is big. This is like the energetic firewalls, because it's not okay for a person in this great symphony of life to just decide, oh, I don't like my planet. I'm going to build a clank metal spaceship and fly elsewhere. And I'm going to spew my microbes all around and squash tiny organisms wherever I walk and do whatever I want that's convenient for me, whether or not it is right or convenient for the larger system of time and life that I'm embedded within. You can't even say, oh, they're doing it out of ignorance. No. A lot of these beings know exactly what they're doing. They consider it almost like a type of manifest destiny, or the concept of Europeans coming to North America and overruling and overriding the pre-existing organisms and human culture that were here. So North America had its own microbiome, had its own set of viruses and infectious diseases. And when the Europeans came here, they not only brought their ideas and their culture and their technology, they also brought their microbes. And that infected a lot of the beings who already lived on this continent, who then got horribly sick and died. And it was totally not according to the giant plan of the symphony of life. So it's not okay to do that on other planets. It's not okay for each one of us as a human on Earth to say, hey, I'm going to build a clank metal spaceship. I'm covered with microbes. My poop is covered in microbes. I'm going to fly to a far distant planet, and then I'm going to step out of my vehicle and I'm going to share all of my microbes with that planet. Like, that's not supposed to happen, because that would put out of balance the very delicate music, the music of life that's on that particular planet. So this whole idea of, oh, there's no one else out there and humans are the only beings that are in existence, or humans are the only consciousness, and even the idea of entitlement, like it's your right to go wherever you want to go, spread your microbes wherever you want to. No, that is highly erroneous. And the firewall, this energetic firewall, is supposed to exist to prevent those ignorant or malevolent or highly erroneous presumptive people from getting off the surface of their planet. Like, you ain't supposed to spread yourself around until you're ready to be what I would consider to be a good galactic citizen. And that means, like, you are sensitive to the other musicians in the band, that you recognize that all these other organisms not only exist but have a right to exist, and don't twist that around to say, oh, well, the evil organisms have a right to exist too and they're allowed to use their technology. No, I'm going to do this like buzzer, no, wrong, sorry, but thank you for playing. That's the twisted pretzel logic that says, oh, evil's allowed to exist. No, evil's never supposed to exist. What's supposed to happen in this band is that everybody's a good musician. That is what life was like in Atlantis. Everybody got emanated on a bridge of love into a human container that can only be described as a divine being on Earth. Everybody who was alive on Earth still maintained their pure divine connection. And everybody who was here, basically our bodies worked differently. We didn't have to eat other organisms in order to stay alive. And that assertion is so radical to people of this time and place that many people can hardly even get past that. They're like, blah, ha, ha, Aurora, you're crazy. What a crazy, wild, ridiculous thing to say, that you didn't have to eat anyone else in order to be alive. Oh, wait, brief pause while I save my work. Yeah, not only did you not have to eat anybody else in order to stay alive, but what we did was ate light directly. So because of, it's like if your body is a guitar and these invaders of consciousness came to this planet invisibly, not in a clank metal spaceship, and they invaded consciousness, they invaded the genetic code of humanity, and they changed the strings on the guitar or took some away or changed the tuning of the knobs. And then all of a sudden this body could no longer eat light directly. It's what we're supposed to do. We came from light. We're supposed to come here, be accumulated, solidified light in the form of matter. And then we're supposed to eat light. We're supposed to be like running on solar power. We're not supposed to be running like steam engines. And I've said this so many times. Steam engines, you shovel coal into a big giant furnace and it burns the coal in the furnace and it belches out a lot of smoke and also belches out energy that can be harvested for kinetic movement. That's kind of the way that the human body is being used right now. You shovel a bunch of calories through the mouth into the tummy, and then it gets digested, it gets fermented, it literally gets burned. We talk about burning calories. That is a literal truth. And it is turned into energy that can be used to move your muscles, like a steam engine. And also, it creates tons of waste. Like steam engines had like belching out smoke and lots of heat and lots of everything and pollution. Hey, guess what? We, create tons and tons of, we poop things out, we urinate, we exert all of this, I wouldn't call it pollution, but the end result of combustion. We're constantly sharing that around, and it's a very inefficient way to use our body. And it's why there's so much wear and tear on the engine. That's why the body doesn't last as long as it's supposed to. So part of it is the malevolent beings that invaded our planet and invaded the human genome have been siphoning off life force energy. Once again, sorry for any background noise there. Yes, those beings are siphoning off life force energy, kind of like in that movie The Dark Crystal, where the little beings are having their soul and their light energy sucked away from them by the evil beings. That's going on here. And also, at the same time, the physical body has been repurposed and is being used as this very inefficient engine. And all of that has drastically shortened the human lifespan. We are designed to be able to live hundreds, if not thousands of years, and then not die, but instead make this metamorphosis or transformation. So in the time before death, that's why this is almost like a mythological story here. Nobody had to die. Plants and animals did not have to die either, because we didn't have to eat a salad. We didn't have to eat a hamburger. We didn't have to eat, anything. We only had to eat light. So I'm not going to go into any kind of diatribe regarding vegetarianism or veganism, although many times people have come at me with a lot of judgment because I'm openly not a vegan or a vegetarian. I eat both plants and animals. And I don't have any qualms about that because I really recognize that life and consciousness is contained within any of the organisms that we are eating in order to fuel our body with nutrition. And that includes plants and seeds. If you're eating seeds, you are literally eating the potential future generations of a plant. And please disabuse yourselves of any notions otherwise. Please don't say, oh, you're not killing, or you're not causing suffering, or you're not causing harm, or whatever, if you eat an entirely plant-based diet. That is not based in truth. And I feel that there's so much of this guilt and a sense of unworthiness. And a lot of that is programmed in as part of the genetic fall. That people are like, people don't even feel here on earth that they are worthy of eating food. Because the truth is, in this, the way this game is set up right now, you have to kill in order to stay alive. You have to kill another organism. And we can even get into the idea of microbes that inhabit your intestines. You are digesting microbes all the time. There are yeasts that help to ferment. Like if you make a pickle, here's what happens. Or if you make some fermented kimchi or some food, you put a jar and some food into, sorry, let me start again here. Blah, blah, blah. Sometimes my mouth doesn't work. You put food into a jar, and naturally occurring yeasts and microorganisms from the atmosphere go in there because they say, hey, here's a perfect place, a culture. I can form a culture here. They form a whole culture, literally. And then they digest a lot of the nutrients in the food, and then you eat the food along with the microorganisms, and then you get nutrition that has already been unlocked or pre-digested by those organisms. You're literally killing organisms when you eat them like that. And some of them proliferate in your intestines, but they die and they make future generations. You are constantly consuming microorganisms. If you didn't have those microorganisms in your tummy, you would literally die, because you cannot just put food that is perfectly sterilized into a perfectly sterilized intestine and receive nutrition in the body. We must be in this partnership with microbes. If we don't have people who don't have the right microbes in their tummy, or have some kind of a disease, or have taken too many antibiotics and killed their microbiome, they get failure to thrive. Like you put food in, but the food doesn't go into your body system. This is the whole point. We are in partnership with other organisms. We must be at this level of our existence because we cannot eat light directly, and that's because our bodies have been degraded. So it is just a basic plain truth that at this level of experience and life and understanding, each one of us has to eat other living organisms in order to get life force energy indirectly. What we are supposed to be able to do is use our higher faculties. And by this I mean the unconditional love, like heart center of your body is like the foundation of those higher faculties. And then communication or truth and insight and connection to the divine or to higher dimensional, less dense realms. Those are three organs that rest on the foundation of unconditional love. That's like the gas that makes your car go. And your higher faculties are part of what connects us to higher dimensional, less dense realms, and also allows us to perceive the invisible, what is not visible to the five senses. And it's also our attention. And attention comes from Greek for attenuos, meaning to reach out. And that means that we are designed to reach out to the sun and the stars for our nutrition and consciousness supporting needs. Our parent, the stars, has placed us here and created us, not so that, you have to kill an animal with a flint knife and, grind it up somehow or cook it or something to unlock those nutrients, somehow, poop it out and stay alive down there. That's not actually what was supposed to happen. We were made as beautiful art projects that could live peacefully, like in what would be considered, I'm just moving my chair, what would be considered almost a utopia, where you live in peace because you don't have to have violence and you don't have to have death because you have everything that you need. And this, sorry for the garage sound, everyone. This present level of reality, or this game, the rules of this game, were programmed intentionally to make us have to not only have limited lifespans, but rely upon the death of other beings. That those beings that occupy the interstices, the membranes of death, they want more death. A good, accurate description of them, people have started calling it the death cult. That's accurate. And the death cult refers to any level of human society or culturalization that encourages or accepts or promotes the necessity of death. So that can be anything from traditional Christianity, and I make this very clear whenever I say this. I am not here as some interdimensional visitor to condescend or sneer at earth, human, religion or faith. I think faith is very beautiful, and that there's a lot about the Christian religion. There are many people follow it who are very well intentioned and who are actually looking for something more sublime than our present level of existence. What I do not agree with is this idea of the basic premise of that religion talking about how absolutely necessary suffering and death are to the experience of transcendence. That it also makes it appear that it doesn't matter what happens in this life as long as you die and go to heaven. None of that is truthful. And that's also, there's a lot of death cult stuff. There's that in Christianity. There's stuff in human culture, like how we would consider famous artists or creative beings or musicians, how many people only achieve notoriety after their death, or that they die in some spectacular way, or even the idea of dying as a war hero, that would be considered more socially valuable and rewarded than staying alive, which would be, you're a coward, you ran away from the war and you're still alive, but everybody hates you. So I'm talking also about, rock and roll. We have all of these icons of rock and roll who were great musicians, but who led a self-destructive lifestyle and died. And then everybody knew about them, and their reputations were cemented, in everybody's memory for history. And none of that is by accident. All of that is intentional. And this goes back to Judaism. So if I've offended any Christians in my, understanding of the sacrifice of Christ, I'm now going to offend a bunch of Jewish people because that entire religion is based upon animal sacrifice. And it is my understanding that is not the intention for the creator of these instruments known as living bodies. That the creator didn't say, let me make a bunch of instruments, and you guys with those guitars over there, you're supposed to use your guitars to smash these guys' clarinets over here. That is not the way the music of the Symphony of Life is supposed to be played. And the idea of, sacrificing a dove or sacrificing an oxen or a ram or whatever, that's basically the origins of Judaism. And that these vestigial traces still exist in the Jewish people writing the holy words of the Torah, or the first book, the books of Moses, only on animal parchment. It cannot be written just on, regular papyrus or paper or something like that, that in order for it to be a kosher Torah scroll, it must be written on the skin of an animal that's known as parchment. And that's there. And there's also the Paschal Lamb and the Passover celebration. These sacrifices of animals are part of the religion. And to me, that is all about feeding the interstices, putting more and more dead people on the interstices. So the interstices are supposed to be like clear blood vessels that don't have any blockages. It's supposed to be a place of pure entropy. That means no motion, frozenness, no consciousness, no bleed through. And instead, what has happened is death was invented, and all these consciousnesses went into the realm of the dead. And then there's been dead folks, like residual traces of consciousness in that zone where it's not supposed to be for a really, really, really long time. And I would be highly suspect of any god or, soi-disant, self-proclaimed god that says, hey there, everybody, I'm your god, please listen to me. Ahem, 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 I need you to kill this many oxen for me. And I need you to kill this many deer, and I need you to kill this many doves. And oh yeah, you can go down there, you can kill those Canaanites too. That is not what I would say a divine parent would do. And I do not, again, mean to cast aspersions or appear condescending. I am being logical about all of this and looking at it from this higher dimensional viewpoint. So that dark technology, that satanic technology, it runs on beings who have died prematurely. This is why murder is so powerful and why murder is so profoundly disturbing. That you take a totally healthy organism that could have lived for 5, 10, 20, 100 more years, and you intentionally end their life. And all of that force, like imagine the force of a baseball flying across the sky. If you suddenly, make it hit a brick wall, it's like you have all of that force to siphon off. And that is what murder is. And when these invaders came to this world, that is what they did. Essentially, they murdered a whole bunch of people by putting their guitars out of tune and trying to cohabitate in their bodies together. And the bodies that we're using right now, these domesticated human forms, are the end result of trying to shoehorn in invaders who are not supposed to be here. And those invaders are genetic invaders that, like, imagine you own your own home and you've got squatters that just kind of pry open the windows and come in through the bathroom, and they set up like a little tent and they set up a little campsite. They start cooking mini hot dogs there, and all of a sudden they're living in your house. This is what happened with these invaders that came to our planet. And the invasion was so profoundly disturbing to the format of our bodies. The insult was so great that many people died instantaneously. And that was in a culture where nobody died. So what was the process like of transformation before people died? My best description is that, here we don't want people to die who we love. You're like, oh, I love grandma. I don't want grandma to die. But back then, because death is considered like an end of a person's life, but ascension or transformation is not the end. So it was something that was actually celebrated. It was like a graduation. But I don't want anyone in this time and place to be like, oh, let me go get a gun and kill myself for others because I want them to graduate. Please don't be so simplistic or erroneous in your interpretation of what I'm saying here. This was in the ancient time before our bodies were changed and transformed. So you lived like a god. That's the only way I can describe it. In a state of total health and total well-being, connected to the divine, like the great composer telling you what to play. And you're also a jazz musician where you can jazz around, you can bebop, you can come up with new thoughts and new ideas in the moment spontaneously. And that you can live like that for as many hundreds of thousands of years as you want to. Imagine exploring everything you want to explore. Go into all the places that you want to go to, meeting all the people that you want to meet, having all the experiences that you want to experience. And yeah, we ate sunlight directly. So that means you focus your attention, the tendril of attention that can draw in energy directly on the sun. And in the antediluvian world, like the way we currently have refrigerators, you got a big giant metal box in the middle of your house. Everybody has one, even if you're poor, because you got to store up your food. Well, everybody in Atlantis, and nobody was poor, everybody was rich. Everybody had big giant crystals because crystals were like energy storage devices for light from the sun and the stars. And we created there were environments that literally fed everyone. So you can ask this question, Aurora, why don't you just eat pure sunlight? And the truth is, when I came here into this body, I'm a galactic walk-in, everyone. I'm an abstraction. I'm not used to being in this body. When I first came into this body, I thought I could just eat pure sunlight. And I didn't understand that what was going on and that I had to eat physical food. And the point is, not only did I not have a giant, refrigerator-sized rose quartz in my home, I didn't have extensive gardens around my home, all these things that emit life force energy. So in the antediluvian world, our environments are part of what fed us. And as we are transitioning out of this materialized body, that is a meat or a plant eating or a life eating body, whatever you eat, please don't be judgmental of me. I eat meat, I eat stuff, I eat animals, I eat eggs. And I do make this distinction. I find locally raised, humanely raised eggs, it's no problem. I find, people who love their chickens so much and treat them very well and eat those eggs. But guess what? That's still a potential for life, or might even have been fertilized. And I'm eating it, yes, unabashedly. And the animals, other animals that I eat, lived in actual fresh air and ate actual grass, not like in a horrible, tightly packed feedlot. Like I definitely eat that quality of animal products. And I don't pretend that their death didn't hurt. It did. That is part of what we're like, something, if you cut a plant down, its death hurts. If you grind up a seed, that's literally an asleep consciousness in a plant. That's a plant in stasis. That is what a seed is. If you grind it up to eat it, you are killing the potential for life, and it doesn't feel good to anyone. This is the dichotomy of being here, and I'm encouraging everyone while we're in transition not to feel guilty about the use of resources to keep your body alive, because we're transitioning out of here. So my little anecdote is that I had to learn about how to eat food. I had to learn what was good food. It was a many years long process because I didn't know that there's so much pollution in all the food around here, and then finding out what works for my body. So I figured out the things that work for my particular body. That is why I eat the way I do, and I also have a highly anomalous body. So I don't give anybody else dietary advice or tell them what to eat or how to exercise, because I am running this steam engine in a very unusual way. So I eat rather unusual foods. So I encourage everyone to eat what is right for your own body, and really not to be judgmental of others, because we are all having to eat other life forms in order to stay alive until we make this transition to being pure light eaters again. So what part of my challenge when I first came here as Aurora was that I didn't have crystals. I didn't do for holding energy, or like if you have ever been in a Zen garden or one of these highly manicured, very special gardens, the energy that goes into the placement of plants and the way that they're growing and the placement of stones, all of that can reflect energy back to you. It's basically saying, like, you don't just eat nothing, you eat energy. And in this time and place, not only is it difficult to create that and to make a life for yourself like that, an oasis like that, and there's everything in the world that is working against that. All of these electromagnetic fields are the literal antithesis of what we would be cultivating in ancient Atlantis to feed us. We cultivated like a symphony of energy around us that was always reflecting energy back to us, kept us young, healthy, and vital, food without actually eating to kill other beings. And here, all of the yes, I said fry, like fry an egg, all of the EMFs, cell phone, unprotected electrical equipment, things that aren't properly insulated, all of that eats away at your energy field. You have to be a super badass person here in this time and place to even cultivate an energy field, because there are so many environmental pollutants that are trying to eat away at it. And I don't mean just literal chemicals. I mean all of the invisible stuff that smart meters, microwave ovens. Can I tell everyone how much I despise microwave ovens? And you should never use it, because it's just totally, people are telling themselves a story. They're like glad handling. They're like, oh, I'm sure everything is fine. The FDA has these approved and it's great. It's like, no, it's actually not great. It emits tiny amounts of radiation and it emits a huge amount of disruption to the magnetic field. So just think about all the things, electrical appliances and stuff like that when they're running, they're disrupting your magnetic field, and same thing with computers. And hey, guess what? I have a computer in front of me right now because I couldn't share these ideas if I didn't have one. So I have had to learn to be very super badass about maintaining my energy field. And I do a bunch of things. Like I've also got a cup of shungite water right next to me that I'm drinking. I drink out of a shungite cup. I put chunks of shungite in my water. I put a nice plate of shungite right underneath my computer. I put shungite in my face cream. I put it on my skin as much as possible. I put it all over, because that stuff will really help you to block out EMFs. And There's because if you own your own home, there are other things you can do in terms of paint that shields you from EMFs, building a Faraday cage around any kind of smart meter. You can put up curtains that protect you from EMFs. There's lots of things you can do in your environment in order to block out basically the bad music and cultivate the good music. So I put wonderful crystals around my house. I do use sage and other essential oils in the air, whatever you can do in order to cultivate an environment that promotes consciousness. So really, in order for all of us to become pure light eaters again, we might also have to become nomadic in terms of going where the sunlight is. So in the wintertime, the sunlight might be far to the south. You might have to travel there and live there during the winter. You might not be able to live, in Chicago or New York if you are a light eater, if there's a minimal amount of light at those latitudes during the winter months. And our entire society in terms of property ownership and residency is set up as the antithesis of that. There is not an easy way to be nomadic and travel around and go from, where it is warm and sunny to where it is warm and sunny. It's like being a plant. If you are a plant, you can only live when there is sunlight, and you cannot stay alive if there's no sunlight. This is what it is. So we would have to restructure not only our bodies, but our entire sense of ownership, of real estate, of residency. It's a big, huge transition. And that's my answer as to why I call myself, I'm like they have these hybrid vehicles. I'm not talking about any kind of transhumanism stuff, but I'm saying there's these cars that can run on an electric charge, but then if they don't have enough, then they can run to gasoline too. That is what my body is like. I eat both physical food to feed the muscle fiber of my physical body, and I also do sun gazing every day, which is ingesting light directly through my inner eye or my attention, and that feeds my invisible parts of my body. And this transition that we're making, birth of a new dimension, means that we're exiting the womb of the matter. And when I say raising our vibration, that's a very overused, hackneyed phrase. What it means is going from ooh, you are going from a lower note to a higher note. And that is through adding energy. By adding more and more and more light energy into these bodies, it becomes possible to not just run like a steam engine, or like a hybrid, part steam, part solar engine, but all of a sudden to become a pure solar engine. And that is what our birthright is. That's what we're supposed to be. So once again, as we're all in that transition, let us be loving towards one another. I recognize that some people want to eat very little. Some people want to be fruitarians and eat nothing but fruit. Some people want to be raw vegans. I respect all of those dietary choices, and everybody has a different approach to what it takes for them to go from lower to higher. So yes, let us please, because this is, and also my intended audience, I'm intending to speak to people who I would consider to be the good musicians, the advanced jazz band. I'm not talking to people that never picked up their instrument or don't know what a C or a D is. They're not even liking music. They don't even like what they're doing here. So I recognize that there are a lot of people that are, the unconscious, people who are maybe even portals for malevolence, maybe people who are not winning the battle because we've got this struggle inside of each one of us of the squatters in your genetic code versus the real you. And the real you is this loving, empathic and compassionate person. And it's appropriate to be empathic and compassionate towards animals and microorganisms and plants that are all a part of this struggle. Because look, if we didn't have to eat physical food, we wouldn't have to inhibit the processes of plants at all. And the whole idea of farming is, again, an aberration. But I'm not pointing the finger of blame and being like, all of you humans are bad and wrong because you do domesticated agriculture. No, that's part of human civilization. That is what has allowed what is known as human history to develop. And the whole idea is naturally occurring plants, wheat and corn were originally these grasses that looked kind of like what grows out of your front lawn, just like these green grasses. And it was only through many, many generations of selectively breeding them that humans created these big, fat, juicy ears of corn that you could eat. And that's a disrespect to the corn plant, because it wants to marry whom it wants to marry. It's like, I love this pollen loves that pistil and wants to go in there and fertilize that particular plant. And humans were like, no, you don't get to fertilize that one. You get to fertilize this one over here. It's like, but wait, I don't love that female corn plant. I don't want to fertilize that one, but you have to, because we make you. It's arranged marriages in the plant realm. And if we're talking about respecting other organisms, this is a disrespect to other organisms. But I'm not here complaining and saying like, oh my God, it's so horrible that corn and wheat are in existence as, selectively bred, transformed agricultural products. Like they've been necessary for a very long amount of time. But what was going on in ancient Atlantis was that it was not necessary to have arranged marriages in the plant realm. And all of these wonderful, interesting things could happen through plants being free to live and interact in the way that they wanted to and do their own thing, just in the same way that animals could be free to interact as they wanted to and do their own thing. And because death didn't exist, just this transformation process. So also, with grandma, we were talking about grandma and how you don't want grandma to die, but you want grandma to ascend, because you don't actually lose grandma when she ascends. So what would happen is you'd live for many hundreds or thousands of years, in a physical body, but still connected to the great composer, making great jazz music, having fun adventures, and then you'd get bored. You'd be like, wow, I have done it. I have done the everything here. And I've done this and this and this, and I'm a total expert. And then you're ready to go. It's like when you have read a really good book and you completed it, or ate a really fine meal, or completed your course of studies, or, it's like if you read every book in the library, you've done it. You're like, I did all of that, and now I'm ready for something new, and I need to be challenged, I need to grow in a new direction. Then it was time to ascend. And what happened was, everybody who knew you throughout your life and whom your life had touched, like if you spoke to them or you made some artwork that touched them, or it helped them in some way, healed them in some way, everybody gathers around you, and it's like a celebration of your life and all the things that you've done. And everybody would send through their telepathy energy of good wishes, like on your marathon journey. You're going to go on a marathon now, and we all love you. And not like we want to hold you back. That's how people feel about death. Like you're like holding on to grandma's hand and being like, grandma, don't die. Stay here and make cookies. And it's like, no, honey, because your body's old and you got to go somewhere else. It wasn't like that at all. Everyone was like, yeah, grandma, go. Like a person's running a marathon, like do it, run that marathon of consciousness. And then what would happen is, someone once said to me, like, is it kind of like spontaneous human combustion? That's a pretty good analogy, because there's almost nothing to use as an analogy in this time and place. But let's just call it like a fire that is kindled from within. That is transformative. Fire is a transformative element or plasma that makes things change state from a solid to a gas. If you put a log of wood into a fire, it goes from being a solid to being a gas, and also tons of energy and tons of heat. And that is what happens. This consciousness fire is kindled from within on a cellular level, and it transforms the cells of the body in exactly the same way that an electron makes the leap from one shell of excitation to the next shell. So that leap of excitation in science on Earth right now is known as the quantum leap. And quantum meaning it has to be done all at once. A big, giant leap. And so the electron has to get super excited. It has to save lots of energy in its electron savings account. Like, oh, is there enough energy to make that leap today? No, not yet. Keep saving. And then eventually you reach that critical threshold when it's like, I've got enough energy and I'm ready to buy that ticket. I'm ready to make that leap. And the leap is like, into a new state of being. So everybody would cheer on grandma and say, we love you, we love you, we love you. Make that leap. Grandma would leap into a new state of being, not leave behind a stinking, rotting, decomposing, horrible, liquefying corpse. None of that is what happened. Every single person successfully made the leap. That means the body was the fuel for the journey. The body transformed, physical cellular matter transformed into non-physical body matter. And then, because everybody in the ancient world still had their higher faculties, you could still perceive those people who had graduated or gone beyond these levels or been born. It wasn't necessarily like, oh, everybody becomes invisible and now I can't talk with them. It's like, oh, you can still talk with grandma, but grandma looks different. Grandma is a butterfly now, and you are still in your material, suit. But back then, Everybody had their higher faculties. So in this time and place, it's considered to be a rare gift if you can talk to spirits, or if you can perceive the dead, or, be some kind of an intermediary between the living and the dead. And people even pay money, like, yeah, you pay me some money, I'll talk to your dead husband for you. But that's not, or in indigenous cultures, it is considered normal to talk to the ancestors. And a lot of them have maintained their higher faculties much better than the more Western industrialized culture, where it's just like there's no higher faculties left. It's supposed to be your birthright to be able to talk to not only your ancestors who have already transcended, but anybody who has they graduated. You should be able to talk to all the grad students. And what's happening in this realm, and in my personal experience, is I mostly get telepathy from the dead people that are stuck on the membrane of death. And a lot of them don't even know that they're dead, and they're not good musicians, and their music is crap. And they basically talk like the peanut gallery. They say all sorts of nonsense and all sorts of distracting stuff. And they might even try to say stuff to you to cause death. They might say to you, you're very sick, I hope you die, you're going to get cancer. And if you internalize that as truth, then you will get sick and you will die. Or they might try to mislead you, while you're driving on the road or anything like that. You're going to crash, that's going to happen. All of those things, all of those anxious thoughts about death, that's essentially occupiers of the interstices trying to harvest you and make you go into the realm of death too. So big takeaway from this presentation here, death is not inevitable. Ascension is actually inevitable. That central core timeline that exits the wormhole of this level of reality is inevitable. And if I'm not at my piano right now, but if I were, I can move my equipment over there, but let me just do this easily. Finding that central core timeline is like saying to a musician, there's 88 keys on this piano, and one of those keys is right, and I won't tell you which one, and I won't give you any music to read either, and you're just going to have to press every single key and listen and see if it's right, and then if you finally find the right key, then you get out of here. That is what this experience of life has been like, and that's why people are so traumatized, because it takes so many wrong notes to finally find the right note, and that's not how it's supposed to be. You're not supposed to have to press every single key until you finally get the right note. Good musicians know, I'm supposed to play a C, I'm supposed to play a D. You can read the music, you know what to play. So that means the behavior patterns, the thoughts, the feelings, the everything that leads us out of this level of limited material existence and into a higher dimensional, less constrained, less dense level of experience. And all of this transformation has to do with time. It has to do with experiencing time, not merely as a fish swimming in water, like water is like time, but also having the perspective of being able to look from the river, like up above from the riverbank. How about up above the river, see where the river is flowing from and where it is flowing to? How about whether the river has ever changed its course over many years? So I know there's actually a lot more I wanted to talk about in terms of ancient Atlantis, and I will get to that in future recordings. But thank you so much to everyone who's on this journey of transformation, and we're really getting to the good stuff. So take heart. Please keep going on the marathon. Don't ever stop, and thank you.